Welcome to Brentwood Presbyterian Church for this very special evening of jazz. This is the world premiere of the Manna and Quail suite. Brentwood has been commissioning for the last 7 or 8 years now sacred jazz suites, many of them based on the parables. This one is based on the story of the Manna and Quail in Exodus. You'll hear that and hear a bit of commentary on that in a moment from Carmen Lansdowne, a longtime friend of Brentwood, the current moderator of the United Church of Canada, former executive director of First United Church, which is where we spent a fair bit of time together. And after she finishes as moderator, she goes on to the faculty of Emmanuel College in Toronto. And so we are honored and delighted that you are here to grace this premiere. Thanks, Carmen. We do understand that Brentwood sits on the ancestral and unceded lands that have been stewarded by the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations for generations. We do that with respect and gratitude. Back in 1994, the Presbyterian Church in Canada issued a confession to God and to the Indigenous people, our Indigenous kin. One of the phrases that stands out for us in that confession is that we confess to having misrepresented Jesus in our relations with our Indigenous kin. And so in humility, and this suite is frankly part of that effort, we seek forgiveness and reconciliation and discovering better ways of living together as God's stewards of this creation. I'm going to introduce the musicians. Noah Franche-Nolan, the composer and our pianist this evening. Francois Houle on clarinet. Nick Bracewell over there on drums. We have the privilege of having Noah as our director of musicking here at Brentwood, and we are deeply grateful for the gifts that he brings to our work here in this little congregation. I should say a little bit about the commissioning of this suite. It has been commissioned in honor of Eugene and Arlene Diespecker. Eugene and Arlene succeeded Eric Powell as the Anglican priest in the village of Kingcome, at the head of Kingcome Inlet. And Carmen, the pronunciation of it in Euanalis, is that? Euquanalis is the name of Kingcome Village that I found. Anyhow, you're supposed to know these things. Anyhow, so Eric Powell was the Anglican priest there in the late 50s, early 60s. There's a book by Margaret Craven called When the Owl Called My Name that many people know. That was about Eric, and when Eric got cancer and had to leave the village in order to get proper medical care, he told the bishop that the only person he knew who could succeed him was Eugene Diespecker, and that's Jill's brother, 2 years older. And so we wanted to, and so when we thought of commissioning Noah to write this suite, I emailed Carmen. And we had been focusing our suites on the parables. And so I said to Carmen, so tell me which parable contains indigenous wisdom. And Carmen, in classic Carmen fashion, wrote back and said, all of them. She said, but why don't you think about asking him to compose a suite around the story of the Manna and Quail in Exodus? So that's what we've done. And I'm going to let Carmen's going to read both the story of the Manna and the Quail from Exodus, but also she's written a wonderful, wonderful commentary on it. And so we've asked her to read that as well. So without further, thank you all for being here. Those of you who have joined us online, thank you for being with us in that way. And those of you who are watching this asynchronously after it gets posted to our YouTube channel, we're delighted to have you participating in that way as well. So without further ado, let me introduce the Rev Dr Carmen Lansdowne, one of Canada's most provocative Indigenous theologians, and as I mentioned, moderator of the United Church of Canada, and a very good friend of Brentwood. Thanks for being here, Carmen.
Thanks, Brian. And Jill, I'm interested to learn about the connection to Kingcome. So I'm from the Heiltsuk First Nation on my mother's side, and fourth generation settler, homesteader from England on my dad's side. And my great-grandfather's first homestead was in Kingcome Village. So, yeah. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm a member of the Heiltsuk First Nation. My traditional names are Gathlestu, which is a name that means eagle with copper teeth, and it was a very spiritual name in our tradition. It was passed on to my mother from the late Eva Starr, one of our matriarchs, for her work, for my mother's work in the church in the 1980s. And when I became moderator last summer at my Uncle Harvey's potlatch, my mom passed that on to me. And my other name also suits me as moderator. It was given to me by a hereditary chief by the name of Rick Johnson from Guilford Island, which is one of the Kwakwaka'wakw tribes, and it is Kwisalach, which means woman who travels to places far away, which is pretty much my job these days. So that the commentary that this suite is based on makes sense, I will also read to you the story from the book of Exodus, which is from chapter 16. The whole congregation of the Israelites set out from Elim, and Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instructions or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on any other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaining against the Lord. For what are we that you complain against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard the complaining that you utter against him, what are we? Your complaining is not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, 'Draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining.'" And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the Israelites, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, "I have heard the complaining of the Israelites. Say to them, 'At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God.'" In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you needs, an omer to a person according to the number of persons, all providing for those in their own tents." The Israelites did so, some gathering more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as each of them needed. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it as much as each needed, but when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers apiece. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning." So they put it aside until morning, as Moses commanded them, and it did not become foul, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is Sabbath, there will be none." On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, and they found none. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he gives you food for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the seventh day." So the people rested on the seventh day. The house of Israel called it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, in order that they may see the food with which I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations." As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the covenant for safekeeping. The Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a habitable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is a tenth of an ephah. The wisdom of the Holy Scriptures. And so this reflection was something that I wrote for a book that was edited by Steve Heinrichs, published by Common Word Press, called Unsettling the Words, Experiments in Decolonizing the Bible, I think is the subtext. But the title is Unsettling the Word. In the old days, our economies were different. The manna story speaks to me of the strength of my Haystaff nation, that we had, how our ancient ways of life naturally aligned to God's created order. Things are different when we believe that the world is a place of abundance. If we trust that Creator has provided us with everything that we might need, there's no need for competition, no need to struggle over scarce resources. We only take what is required because we trust that there will always be more. This is the lesson that the Israelites had to learn. They doubted that there would be more, but the manna spoiled when they tried to hoard it. They needed to trust that Creator loved them and would provide what they needed. They needed to believe that they should only amass more when it makes sense to do so, for rest and to celebrate the rhythms of creation and Creator. Today, our world is dangerously different. We don't manufacture and prepare food only to meet our needs. In Canada, we collectively throw away almost half of the food that ends up in our homes because it spoils before we can eat it. Food is over-harvested and over-prepared. We manufacture the insatiable desire for food to drive the engine of our so-called capitalist economy. This way of life is not consistent with the lessons taught to the Israelites through God's gracious, daily provisions of manna and quail, and it is not consistent with indigenous traditional ways. Those life ways called us to deep trust and humble taking. They also called us to give back. I think of the words of Leanne Simpson, who's Mississauga Anishinaabeg, in her article Land and Reconciliation, Having the Right Conversations. She said, "Our nationhood is based on the idea that the earth is our first mother, that natural resources are not natural resources at all, but gifts from our mother. Our nationhood is based on the foundational concept that we should give up what we can to support the integrity of our homelands for the coming generations. We should give more than we take. It is nationhood based on a series of radiating responsibilities. Learning when enough is one of our biggest challenges. We have confused our wants for needs. We allow ourselves to be swayed by desire and motivated by fear and greed. We don't stop for rest and Sabbath. And in doing so, we forget who we are and whose we are. What if we dared to return to the old ways? What if we took only what we needed? What if we took care of each other and ensured that all were fed? if we remembered the lessons our grandmothers and grandfathers learned in the desert and in the bush and on the waters.
The first reflection is giving the gift of sustenance. There is a story and there is a song. They often, like tonight, go together. They infuse us with a sense of significance, a feel for flourishing, a mystique of meaning. The central characters in this story are a grumbling people and a gracious creator. It's interesting, there's a Jewish translation of the book of Exodus called the Tanakh, and in the New Revised Standard Version, the language is complaining. In the Tanakh, the language is grumbling, which I kind of like better than complaining. Anyhow, so a grumbling people and a gracious creator. The grumblers have been freed from great suffering, slavery in Egypt. They are facing fear as they embark on that liberation. The gracious Creator has heard the sufferings of his people and freed them for their true significance. That significance is to be a blessing to all peoples. There is a deep resonance in this sacred calling, this welcome into partnering with our Creator in spreading the joy of redemptive love. But humans need food to fuel that endeavor. We, like our ancestors, grumble when we don't have it. Our gracious Creator provides it, raining down bread from heaven and covering the camp with quail. Moses and Aaron had a deep sense of the presence of the Lord, the constant companionship of the Creator who covenanted with the people to generate justice through peace. They are the spokesperson through whom the Creator assures the people that they are being fed and satisfied by their Creator's extravagant generosity. The abundance of food is to be used and shared to nourish all the people, to become ambassadors of divine love that is blessing the whole world. There's a mutuality of contribution in this relationship, a responsibility that resonates with the wonder and awe of God mending this world. The people God freed from slavery in Egypt became wrapped up in their anxieties over and over again, questioning the faithfulness of their liberator, losing a sense of the presence of their protector, ignoring and rejecting the purpose for which they had been freed. In addressing the Israelites on the Creator's behalf, Moses and Aaron conveyed clear directions for the stewardship to be exercised over the generous gifts of God. Take enough for your immediate needs and no more. The word of the Lord, conveyed through conversations with Moses and Aaron. That word announces God's desire that the food be enjoyed with gratitude and generosity. All are to be blessed by the provision of this nourishment. All are to trust that more will be provided when needed. There's also an invitation to rest on the seventh day and focus on enjoying the generosity of the Lord. No gathering or preparation is to be done. We're to focus on the wonders of our Creator's gracious providing love. We are to ponder the best ways to align our gratitude with the redemptive energy that's restoring the world's goodness. There's a familiar resonance in our enjoyment of this musicking. We are grateful for its mystic haze that reveals the divine presence. We're grateful for its transformative influence in provoking a sense of wonder and awe. We're grateful for the ways its vibe infuses us and opens up new insights into a humble taking and giving back. It's a gift, generating a basic beat of grace and gratitude. In our Eurocentric imaginations, We have come to see commandments and obedience as requirements to which we must comply in order to achieve acceptance and blessing. In the religious imagination of Western Christianity, a series of prescriptions have been formulated that have to be followed in order to win God's favor. What if that misrepresents the intent and approach of our Creator? What if the Creator's commandments are permissions rather than prescriptions? What if the Spirit of our Creator's Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, approaches us with a forgiving and reconciling love that persistently embraces us back into the family business of mending and repairing the grateful compassion that lies at the core of the melodies, harmonies, and rhythms of a flourishing creation? What if we were given permission to love better and enjoy it, to be more at peace and more patient, to be kinder and more generous, to be more faithful and gentler? What if we were given permission to compose all of these qualities of flourishing into a new way of living together in greater shalom, of living together into the sweet swing of peace with justice for all of creation?
Well, before our final reflection and movement, I want to say a few words of gratitude. First of all, to Noah for composing this wonderful, wonderful piece. I want to say thanks to Noah and Francois and Nick for a beautiful interpretation of it. Thank you so, so much. Ken and Marvin from Burkeville Productions. Burkeville's been with us doing these sacred jazz suites from the time that we began. So Ken and Marvin, wonderful to have you back in the house, and thank you so much for such a great job. And speaking of when we began these sacred jazz suites, I want to acknowledge with gratitude the presence of Dan Reynolds. Dan was our director of musicking here for 10 years before Noah, and has moved on to other projects and opportunities. Dan composed and coordinated the performance of two of our initial sacred jazz suites, The Prodigal Son and the Parable of the Sower. And so, Dan, it's great to see you here. Thanks so much for coming. And for all that you've contributed to connecting us with the jazz community the way we've been able to do. And finally, I want to say thanks to the wonderful people who make up Brentwood Presbyterian Church and who continue to curate and cultivate this space to be a space of creativity that enables this kind of musicking to happen. So thank you to all of them/us as well. So the stuff just kept coming. 40 years, 6 times a week, double on the 6th day. Feeding generations, if you want to do the math, for 12,480 days. This has been a story about the abundant generosity of our caring Creator, and the forming of a communal response that moves from grumbling to gratitude. That gratitude is the foundation of our collaboration with our Creator in mending the flourishing of this world, a world that has been entrusted to us to cultivate its well-being. One Indigenous theologian that Carmen referred to in her article speaks of this grateful response as, I love this phrase, a series of radiating responsibilities, possibilities, permissions, opportunities that shapes the nationhood of Indigenous peoples and indeed of all peoples. The Creator provides sustenance for partnership through a complex ecosystem of interdependencies that's developed and strengthened when humans resonate with the vibe of vitality that the Spirit generates moment by moment throughout this world, a world that is beloved by God.